Parenting Paused here with Leslie. I'm feeling a bit inspired this week to share with you a bit about how this all came about for me, why I choose to dive so deeply, where my inquiry comes from inside of myself. I grew up in a traditional home, which maybe you did also, or you could have grown up in a non-traditional home. But I grew up in a traditional home in the South, and there were lots of things that didn't feel so good to me as a child. There were things that were appropriate for the home. I was told there were rules, there were guidelines, there was manners, there were ways we treated people. But all of these were based in my parents' values or in the culture's values. And very rarely was I asked. I wasn't seen as someone that could actually come to good conclusions or had a heart with compassion that could make my decisions and could see things clearly. It was more that there was just an expectation. And you may have this too. I noticed that I kind of had that in my home. I was more conscious parenting. And so, of course, I had this expectation that my daughter was always going to, as I talked last week, always going to be nice, never be mean, that she was always going to be easygoing. She wasn't going to be hard. I had all these ideas of how I wanted her to be. I wanted her to be the way I was, believe what I believed about religion, believed what I believed about everything, because those were my high values and that's how I saw life. And yet I realized that that wasn't why she came to me. She didn't come to be a mini me. She didn't come to take on my high values, that she came with her own GPS and that she was a smart being. They all are. So I started to get so curious about how she was perceiving me, how she was perceiving the world, what conclusions she was coming to about how she saw people were. And everything just got so interesting then. It just really shone the light on how I got to where I am. Like, where did I get all these values? Where did they come from? Whose voice was I hearing in my head? Where did I get my religious beliefs? Where did I get my beliefs about food? Where were all these things coming from? And I started, especially around parenting, I'll just say that, and I started noticing that so many of my beliefs and ideas were outside. They came from reading things, and then all of a sudden I'd read something a month later and it was completely opposite. I just read something again about MSG. Maybe we had it all wrong. That was the headline. I didn't read it, so I'm not sure what it's about. But again, I just started noticing how I would just pick up on stuff. Oh, there was another article I just read about collagen, it's supposed to be so good. And then I just read this article about where collagen comes from and how it's not so good. And it's just like, right? It just gets so crazy. And I think the parenting world is like that too. So you can imagine how it is for our children. They hear from us a certain belief, then they go to school and they hear a certain belief, then they go to church or wherever their religious institution is and they hear another belief. And they're so innocent and they're taking all of this in. And of course they want to belong. Of course, they want to be like us. That's one of the biggest things. They want to be like us. They want to fit into our family. And yet what I found was that then I wasn't very curious. I was more curious about projecting my beliefs and my ideas onto my daughter than I was about trusting and asking good questions and getting to know how she was perceiving life. Now, I know you probably say, well, I have little ones. And even little ones, it is so cool to get on the inside of what they're thinking. Like, how do they see things? What are they making up in their mind? I mean, they're so beautiful, but they're also so impressionable. So it's really cool when you can start to ask them if you hear something. So many people freak out when a kid says, I hate myself. Right? And then you just want to say, well, you don't hate yourself. You're a good person and you got to love yourself and all, instead of like, well, tell me more about that. How did you come to that conclusion? What's going on in there? Right? Just getting curious, because I have a pure joy pillar that it's never about what we think it's about. And it rarely is about what we think it's about. So it's probably not about hating themselves. It's going to be about something different. So if you drill down in, if you open your ears, which we talked about last week and the week before, if you really, really listen from the seat of kindness, not from the seat of judgment, not from the seat of feeling threatened because they believe differently than you do, you're going to find out a lot about your children, let me tell you. And it is so cool. And then as they get older, you can have discussions about how you see life and then get curious about how they do. And then it even gets better when they get into their 20s, let me tell you. So, lovies, take the time, take a breath, and get curious about how your children are viewing the world a little bit more than how you want them to view your world. All right, have a great week this week. Thank you for listening to this episode of Parenting Paused. If you enjoyed the episode, do me a favor and share it with your mama friends. You can also leave a review wherever you listen, which will support getting the Pure Joy message out. Come on over to the Pure Joy Parenting Practice Facebook page or join me on Instagram to hear more. And don't forget to download your free copy of the Safe Seat course on the Pure Joy website. And while there, check out the offerings page to go deeper in the Pure Joy work.